So every now and then I will get, you know, you'll see these videos where I go and make comments on, and I do this to draw out some debate. Some people might think I do it because I'm a troublemaker. No, I'm doing this to draw out debate. I've said earlier that I will actually, as the term being used today, troll people to get a conversation going about these things that I talk about. The new covenant being for Israel. And so, in this particular instance, there was a YouTuber who, and I didn't even watch the video. 15 secrets the Vatican doesn't want you to know. And he was doing a reaction. So what I did, I thought it was the perfect time to insert a statement, a truthful statement. And the statement was this: oddly enough, the name Jesus Christ is not the name of Hebrew origin. Jesus Christos was born in Britain, 834 BCE, either Britain or Ireland, by the way, but over there in the UK area. BCE, thus having nothing to do with a Jew named Yehoshua born in Judea. Oh, what a tangled web we weave when we practice to deceive. And of course, I assume this is a woman. She says, Amethyst says, ooh, that's interesting. And so what I did, I made a little statement to her, one little statement for her, and that was it. I've made many YouTube videos on the subject. And somehow YouTube got the comments jumbled up, and this guy, Pecos B, or I guess that's for Pecos Bill, was saying, was disputing about his name and said something about Yeshua. Well, that's another thing that that I have mentioned a while back. If somebody is a prince or a king, you don't haphazardly say his name. If you were to go before the Queen of England, you wouldn't call her Lizzie. They'd probably escort you out the door. So why would you say Yeshua? You say Yehoshua. Why? Because Yeshua just means salvation. Yehoshua means Jehovah's salvation. So I corrected him that his name was Yehoshua. And so this guy Pecos B says, interesting name. So what is the Oh, that's right. So this was an answer to this, I believe it was. He's asking, so he pipes up before I do. He says, interesting name, New Covenant is for Israel. So what is the premise behind it? Because according to Jesus, the New Covenant is for Jews and Gentiles alike. Once Jesus takes his people home at the rapture, home to where they have no idea, then his covenant with the Gentile officially ends. That's not true. I was just curious, if you were declaring the new covenant to be only for Israel, most people don't realize that the New Testament is a new covenant, whatever. And so I basically answered. Well, he made a whole bunch of different comments, and I answered one. His name was Yehoshua. All right, so this thing went a long ways. If you want to, I don't know if you can. You should be able to read the comment section, okay? But after all of this stuff that he was talking, I answered him in this way. This is the way I always answer anyone who is trying to dispute with me concerning the gospel, concerning the new covenant, and concerning Israel, I always use Romans 11. Why? The reason is because Romans 11 is the Christian Gentiles' kryptonite. They cannot, their arguments cannot overcome the words of Paul in Romans 11. So any of you Jews who are watching my videos, understand this, and I know you have been taught that Paul, formerly Shaul, was a Jew hater. Nothing could be further from the truth. Indeed, Christians also thought that Paul was a Jew hater, and they are wrong. So my answer to him was Romans 11, verse 25. For I would not, brethren Romans, that you should be ignorant of this mystery, that partial blindness has happened to Israel until the time of the Gentiles ends. And so all Israel shall be saved. You say raptured. For out of Zion shall come the deliverer. Out of Zion, not Rome. And shall turn unholiness from Jacob. And I add all 12 tribes. Because this is my covenant. See Jeremiah 31 verses 31 through 34. And Hebrews 8 verse 8 through 12. Unto them, Israel, when I shall, not might, but shall. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. Shall take away their sins. Israel's sins shall be taken away. Unfortunately, Christians believe the deliverer is, as they say, the Antichrist, because instead of reading Romans 11 in its entirety, they choose to believe the opposing narrative of Cyril's 15th catechetical lecture in verses 11 and 12 says exactly the opposite of what Paul said in Romans 11. Clearly, the church in the last days will be against Israel's Moshiach and actually fight against him when he brings, they want to use the word rapture, I'll give it right back to him. When he brings, raptures all 12 tribes of Israel back to Jerusalem. And this was actually the last comment, as I understand. And could not respond to this one. Could not respond to it at all. So, now I'm going to go and show you something that I saw on ABC News by Russell Goldman. Now, I know some of you see the name Goldman. Oh, he's a Jew, he's a Jew. An unbeliever. Let's read it, shall we? This is from July the 2nd, 2010. Jesus Christ may not have died on the cross as... Now, where Russell Goldman is wrong is there was never a Jesus Christ in Judea. There never was a man by the name of Jesus Christ in Judea. But what I'm getting at here is a fallacy, a falsehood that was created because of idolatry. For 2,000 years, the crucifix has been a potent symbol of both Jesus Christ's death and Christianity. Now, one Swedish theologian, a Swedish theologian, says that despite the crucifix's proliferation in art and literature, there is scant evidence in the Bible or other ancient sources to indicate that Christ was killed on a cross, as he says. Gunnar Samuelson, an evangelical preacher. Oh, we got a Christian here. And theologians said he spent 3 years combing thousands of ancient texts to research his recently completed 400-page doctoral thesis, Crucifixion in Antiquity. I want you all to listen very, very carefully. And I want to warn you against believing the lie rather than the truth after I go through this article. What he discovered came as a shock, and while there were numerous references to suspension devices used for execution at the time of, as he says, Christ's death, it's another fallacy that he needs to unlearn, he could find no explicit references to the classic T-shaped cross. There is no distinct punishment called crucifixion, no distinct punishment device called a crucifix anywhere mentioned in any of the ancient texts, including the Gospels. Well, ain't that something? You know, it's kind of like people calling today, they're calling their chapels churches. Or they call a homosexual gay. You see, it's right up there with that kind of abomination. He told abcnews.com, but Samuelson devoutly believes the story of, as he says, Jesus' death and resurrection, but says the generations of people have misinterpreted and mistranslated the Greek word stauros to mean crucifix. And I have mentioned to you, and I have showed you using Bible Hub how King James and other versions have deliberately deceived the people. And people willingly fall for it, and the proof is they willingly fall for the lies is they knowingly celebrate Christmas, Santa Claus, the myth fable of Santa Claus, knowing that it's false, which is proof they cannot claim that they didn't know any better, when really the term just means a suspension device. Stauros means suspension device, which might have been anything such as a pole or a tree trunk. Now, just to make a point here, we'll go look up stauros, all right? Or look up cross, King James Version. All right. So we'll look at, hold on. I don't know why I synced at that, but we'll try again. Oh, third time. Okay, carrying his own cross. That is a good one. Let's go for that one. That was in verse 17. All right. Verse 17. So we have the English word cross. His stauros, just like it says. Now, see, as I have informed you, that even Strong's Concordance, the Strong's Concordance was developed by a cross-believing Christian. So even it does not put away all the deception. The definition is an upright stake or an upright pole. All right. Now, they claim, even Strong's Concordance claims that It's a cross piece. But if you bother to look in actual Greek definition, not so. When really the term means a suspension device, which might have been anything such as a pole or a tree trunk. The earliest version of the New Covenant, were written in Greek. If you chose just to read the text and ignore the art and theology, there is quite a small amount of information about the so-called crucifixion. As he falsely says, Jesus, the Bible says, carried something called a stauros out of cavalry. Everyone thought it meant cross. But it does not only mean cross. We cannot say every instance of this noun, stauros, refers to a cross, Samuelson said. Suspension devices, basically tall poles or pikes. Yes, a pike. Now, you British, and many Americans too, are very familiar with the term a pike, were routinely used in the ancient world by the Romans and their counterparts, both as execution devices and for displaying the bodies of executed criminals and enemies as a public warning. So now we're going to look up the word pike. Not a northern pike. Let's see, pike. Polearm? I'm not sure. Is a long thrusting spear formerly used extensively by infantrymen. Okay? So that's that version of a pike. So let's do this. Hold on. Oh, hold on. Execution device. Why are they bringing up her? Ancient. Or no, Roman. All right. The term crux simplex was I look at here. The term crux simplex was invented by Justus Lipsius. Well, this was in 1547, 1606 to indicate a plain transomless wooden stake used for executing either by affixing the victim to it or by impaling him with it. I guess they brought it back. If you can see the picture, there it is. It wasn't invented by him. This was used long before him. This is how they did it in the Roman times. It's the same thing, without a cross member, without a transom. Now, so they always add the in particular here. Latin crux, generically a tree, frame, or other wooden instrument of execution in which criminals were impaled or hanged. And so they add in particular a cross. So we'll continue to Jewish war. Okay, so this one right here, Seneca the Younger, this is 4 BCE to 65. Records the use of the 1st century of the crux simplex ad fixionem impalement, but does not mention the crux simplex ad affixionem. He seems to indicate that execution on a crux tended to follow a fairly common routine While still being open to significant variations, departure from normal routine is also mentioned by Josephus in his the Jewish War. Soldiers, out of the wrath and hatred they bore the Jews, nailed those they caught one way and another after another, as they claimed, to the crosses by the way of jest, when the multitude was so great that room was wanting for the so-called crosses lacked because of so many bodies. Now, after 180, 125 to after 180 indicates that the normal execution cross-shaped like the letter T in Greek called tall. But wait a minute, I thought it was stauros, not a tall. It says right here, stauros, not a tall. What is a tall? There you have it. You see what's going on here, folks? In his trial of the court of the vowels, the Greek letter sigma accuses the letter tau of providing tyrants with the model for his wooden instrument, with which to crucify people. It was his body that tyrants looked for a model, his shape that they imitated. They set up the erections on which men are crucified. It looks to me, it says 125 to after 180. Oh, he was a satire fellow. So this was many years, over 100 years afterward, where they started switching from the stauros to the tau. You see. But we're going to go ahead and keep reading this right here. Suspension devices, basically tall poles or pikes, were routinely used in the ancient world by the Romans and the contemporaries, both as execution devices and for displaying the bodies of executed criminals and enemies as a public warning. Part of what tipped Samuelson off to the apparent mistranslation were routine references to things like fruit and dead animals being crucified in ancient texts, where translating the word as suspended makes more sense. For Samuelson, a 44-year-old pastor who is completing his research at the University of Gothenburg, his faith leads him to believe in a tradition that, as he claims, Jesus was suspended on a cross. However, he says, we don't know how these wicked people next to him, or on the right or on the left, were executed, or what devices looked like for the people the day before or the day after. I'm not saying no crucifixions took place in the ancient world, but we cannot find evidence of them in ancient texts. And of course, Christianity today is a land, an era of make-believe. As I said about Santa Claus coming down the chimney, or rabbits laying Easter eggs, bringing utter and complete falsehoods that nature itself tells you is a falsehood. If they cannot tell the truth concerning Easter egg or concerning an old man sliding down the chimney, then they cannot tell the truth about anything. Now, given that Romans were careful record keepers who wrote detailed and gruesome histories about their military conquests and lengthy legal treatises, it is strange that they would not have written plainly about their execution methods, he explained. Samuelson said the idea of suspension devices would have been understood in the ancient world and by the contemporaries of not Jesus, but Yehoshua. See, even he can't get past the lies. If you were walking around Galilee and heard not Jesus but Yehoshua say he will be suspended in days, people would have an understanding of the kind of torture involved. While the Gospels mention Jesus' suspension, the actual Gospels, none specify a cross according to Samuelson. Furthermore, the Passion is described differently in different Gospels and has depicted in various ways throughout history. And of course, all right. Now, just to give you another example of what the so-called church does. They cannot tell the truth. They cannot speak the truth. They're absolutely unable to speak the truth or act out the truth. I know this looks like changing the subject, but it's not. I'll get to that particular scripture in just a minute, the one about believing the lie. Okay, let me try again. This is by Carl Pfeiffer, January 30th, 2009, a challenge for the church. Reading the news about the reintegration of a notorious Holocaust denier into the Catholic Church, as well as an open letter of Cardinal Christoph Schönborn to the chief rabbi of Austria and the Jewish community on the occasion of Holocaust Memorial Day, reminded me of my boyhood experiences at an elementary school in Baden-Baden during the 1930s. When the religious class was taught, I had to leave the classroom. During the break after this lesson, we used to play in the courtyard. I was always abused as murderer of God. So obviously this man is a Jew. Carl Pfeiffer. And accused of having crucified the Savior, was jostled and pushed around. The catechism stood on the first floor and looked out at the cheerful children and gave a kindly smile. It was a prologue of what was to come. Exactly at the time, I was an 8-year-old boy, abused by boys of my age after their lessons in the Catholic faith. Now, every time, listen to me, every time these Christian children were taught from the catechism, right afterwards, they would start attacking the Jewish boy. You see? It is written that an evil tree cannot produce good fruit, and neither can a good tree produce evil fruit. So clearly the catechism is evil. Exactly at the time I was an 8-year-old boy abused by boys of my age after their lessons in the Catholic faith, something else happened. As he says, Father George, or Gog, Blichmer, the Jesuit leader of a missionary group for the conversion of Jews called the Paulist mission work, the mission work of Paul. You see what they're doing with Paul? Paul said all Israel is going to be saved. But I will tell you that the Catholics will not be involved in it. The Catholics have always been involved in the murder, the rape, pillage, and murder of the Jews. Called the Paulist mission work, declared in a public speech in March 1936 that the Jews belong to a different race, that the German people, writes Bruce F. Pauley from The Prejudice to Persecution, A History of Austrian Anti-Semitism, sympathy for the Jews should not blind Christians to the dangerous, contagious effects of the Jewish national character and to the spiritual homelessness of the Jews. But they never read Romans 11, because if they would have, and if they would have believed it, they would never say such abominable things. Because of their race, Blichmar believed Jews remained different from Christians even if they were baptized. He therefore opposed baptized Jews holding any high office in the church hierarchy or the civil service up to the third generation. The Austrian Nazis could quote Catholic anti-Semites to make it clear that the people, that they were just continuing what Catholics had proclaimed for many decades. And not only Catholics, Protestants, as I have mentioned so many times. I will get to the Judensal once again. I know many of you are tired of me quoting quoting Wikipedia on the Judensal, but I'm going to do it anyway. All Nazi outrages were accepted by the official church in silence. Dealing with the others, the non-Christians, I being one, non-Christian, especially the Jews, Aryanization, the orgy of terror and theft, ostracism of the Jews first, from the public, and then from the private economic sector, and finally deportation. Oh no, not finally deportation. Finally the Shoah. True, a few individual Catholics asserted themselves bravely on behalf of a few Jews, and that is true. And those few who helped these Jews, who saved the lives of these Jews, their lives are going to be saved in the time of the end. Because you have done it to one of the least of these Jews, my brethren, you have done it unto me. But it is to its eternal shame that the church did not even save the converted Jews. They threw them in the gas chambers too. Which means they knew their own religion was falsehood. It was all about killing the Jews. It was never about righteousness. It was never about salvation. It was only about murder. Allowing their deportation instead. Even now the church is proud of having provided them with parcels before they were taken to the cattle trains. Did the Catholic Church come out after their terrible failure during the Volksgemeinschaft, National Socialist Community, with more than verbal condemnations of anti-Semitism after the liberation 1945? No, on the contrary. Bishops had a soft heart for Nazis and helped war criminals to escape justice. And not only did the bishops do this, but so did the U.S. government. But I digress. On March 29, 2008, Cardinal Schoenberg published Judaism's Way to Salvation in the Catholic Weekly, The Tablet, and favored the conversion of Jews. No, Jews will not be saved by being converted to Catholicism. Jews will not be saved by converting to Protestantism. Jews will not be saved by being converted to Christianity. I'll say it again. Jews will not be saved by being converted to Christianity. Jews will be saved by the promises, by Jehovah's promises made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. And Paul talks about it, and Christians have rejected the words of Paul. I'll continue. He reminded the readers about the strengthening of the positive moments of relations between Catholics and Jews, wrote, tensions have, however, been cropping up. The discussion concerning So-called Pope Pius XII, the beatification of, I guess that's the 12th. Hell, I don't know Roman numerals, so-called Pope Pius, whatever that number is, or the revised wording of the Good Friday prayer for the 1962 rite are a few such examples. Karl Schoenberg is albeit for peaceful persuasion. On the other hand, it means that this mandate must be carried out in the most sensitive way, cleansing out of all unchristian motives. I completely disagree with him. Jews must stay away from Christianity. Christianity is a pariah. It is bait. It is a Venus flytrap to trap Jews. No, Paul was not a Christian. Peter was not a Christian. And there was never a Hebrew, ever, born in Judea, named Jesus Christ. In his open letter to the chief rabbi this week, Cardinal Schoenberg now writes, "It is shameful and frightening that these are still people who openly deny the Holocaust and question the Jewish people's right to exist. Unfortunately, there is not one word about the Holocaust denier Bishop Richard Williamson, who was just a few days ago, before the Holocaust Memorial Day, readmitted by, as they say, Pope Benedict into the Catholic Church." So you see, the Catholic Church, they speak out of both sides of their mouth. They don't believe the truth. A double-minded man is unstable in all his ways, so says the scripture. It is strange whenever prominent Austrian Catholics voice crude anti-Semitism, the Church condemns anti-Semitism in general, but very seldom say a word about its actual manifestations. We experienced that right after the Second World War, when conservative OVP politicians degenerated Jews or denigrated Jews returning to Austria during the anti-Semitic campaign of former President Kurt Waldheim, and when in 2000 the late far-right politician George Hader came out with a scathing attack against Ariel Musicant, president of the Austrian Jewish communities. The one exception to the rule was Bishop Reinhold Stecker, who forbade the cult of alleged ritual murder of the Christian boy Andreas Wren in Tyrol. However, in this Catholic website, Jews are accused to this day of having committed ritual murder. This website, he says. Very interesting. Oh, the page is no longer... Oh, they probably finally removed it because this man exposed it. Well, good for him. Karl Schoenberg said in his letter, after the horrendous catastrophe of the Shoah, Christians realized that they too were burdened with guilt. The declaration of the Second Vatican Council and of the popes have meanwhile made it clear to all Catholics that awareness of Christianity's Jewish roots also includes affection for contemporary Judaism. No, Christianity never did. What never was rooted in Judaism. Ever. As I have pointed out many, many times, it goes back to Ireland and the Druids. The Irish Sun King. You can look it up. All right. And it goes on and on. You can look it up, but what I want to do now is I want to go to the Judenzahl on Wikipedia. Right here, even on this SmithsonianMag.com, hatred in plain sight. Somebody asked, in the city where Martin Luther revolutionized, Protestantized Christianity, a vile 700-year-old sculpture openly denigrates Jews. Why is it still there? They don't want to get rid of it because they love it. And so a Jew made a vow to fight on to remove this obscene, blasphemous, graven image of Christianity. Now, I hear, February 4, 2020, anti-Semitic sculpture to remain on German church. Oh, they're gonna keep it. No matter what great tribulation comes, they're going to keep it. So let's go. Judensau, a German word for Jews. Sau. The Sau of the Jews. Never mind the fact that Jews have nothing to do with swine, and the Germans love to eat swine. How is that for hypocrisy? Is a folk art image of Jews in an obscene contact with a large sow, a female pig, in which Judaism is an unclean animal. They call the Jews in Judaism unclean animal that appeared during the 13th century in Germany and some other countries, some other European countries. Its popularity lasted for 600 years. The Jewish prohibition against eating pork comes from the Torah. In the book of Leviticus, chapter 11, verses 2 through 8, the arrangement of the Jews surrounding suckling and having intercourse with the animal. So this is what Christianity is all about. You want to call ahead? Go ahead, call yourself a Christian. If you want to suffer the Great Tribulation, go ahead. I got proof right here. Their own words condemned them. Let me show you. Having intercourse with the animal, sometime regarding as the devil, is a mockery of Judaism. The image appears in the Middle Ages, mostly in carvings on church or cathedral walls, often outside where it could be seen from the street. For example, at Wittenberg and Regensburg, but also in other forms. The earliest appearance seems to be on the underside of a wooden choir stall seat in Cologne Cathedral, dating to about 1210. Now that was before the Reformation. That was before Protestantism. So it began with the Catholic Church, but it spread. The earliest example on the stones, dated to 1230, is located in the cloister of the cathedral at Brandenburg. At about 1470, the image appeared in a woodcut form, and thereafter was also often copied in popular prints, often with anti-Semitic commentary. A wall painting on the bridge tower of Frankfurt am Main, constructed between 1475 and 1507 near the gateway to the Jewish ghetto and demolished in 1801, as especially a notorious example, including a scene of the ritual murder of Simon of Trent. Now, what I want to say about this before I continue, this one right here, we're talking about so-called pious Christians, where works of pornography in their cathedrals more horrific than anything that you can find on the internet today legally. I want you to think about that. Worse, more atrocious, more, what is the word I want to use? Blasphemous. More blasphemous and slanderous, more vile than any form of pornography you can find legally on the internet today was in and outside of Christian houses of worship. I want you to let that sink in for a minute. These houses of worship, even worse than Hugh Hefner's Playboy Mansion. What I'm trying to explain to you is the gravity of the sin. Committed by Christianity. Judensaal in Wittenberg. The city of Wittenberg contains a Judensaal. So this one was one of depicting a rabbi fornicating with a sow while the Jews were sucking from the sow's tits. I'm just trying to tell you how vile your Christianity is. This one in Wittenberg contains a Judensaal from 1305 on the facade of the Stadtkirche. The church where Martin Luther preached. It portrays a rabbi who looks under the sow's tail and other Jews drinking from its tits. An inscription reading, Rabbini Shem Hach Meforesh. And it is essentially bastardizing the holy name of our Creator, the Elohim of the Jews. Right here, they admitted it bastardizes Shem Hach Meforesh, meaning the explicit name. The sculpture is one of the last remaining examples in Germany of medieval Jew baiting in 1988 on the occasion of the 50th anniversary of the Kristallnacht. Debate sprung up about the monument, which resulted in the addition of another sculpture recognizing that during the Holocaust, 6 million Jews were murdered under the sign of the cross. And that is the reason this is a right hand. This is the mark of the beast in your right hand. And you thought it was an engraving. You thought it was an insertion of a card, electronic device, a computer chip. No. What you do with your hand. Murdered under the sign of the cross, therefore anyone who makes the sign of the cross is guilty of the blood of the Jews. And those who on Ash Wednesday put the sign of the cross on their foreheads are guilty of the blood of the Jews, not only in the Holocaust, but in all the other pogroms that occurred before. guilty. In the Martin Luther's book, Von Shem Hachmeforisch, Luther comments on the Judensaal sculpture at Wittenberg, echoing the anti-Semitism of the image and locating the Talmud in the Saal's bowels. And this is a quote from him. So all you Protestants out there are followers of Martin Luther. You are also under condemnation, just like the Catholics. And of course the Russian Orthodox have their own condemnation. As recently as the false publication, or the publication of the false, of the lie, the one concerning the Zionist elders. Hold on, I don't want to get too far off the track. Elders of Zion. The Protocols of the Elders of Zion. This began in Russia. And that also led to the Holocaust. So yes, Russia, the Orthodox Church in Russia, is also partly responsible for this. A fabricated anti-Semitic text purported to describe a Jewish plan for global domination, and the vast majority of Christians today still believe this great lie, including Billy Graham. Let's see. The hoax was plagiarized from several earlier sources, some not anti-Semitic in nature. It was first published in Russia in 1903. Translated into multiple languages and disseminated internationally into the early part of the 20th century, it played a key part in popularizing belief in international Jewish conspiracy. That's where all these Jewish conspiracy theories come from. This false document. Distillations of the work were assigned from German teachers as if factual, to be read by school children in Germany after the Nazis came to power in 1933. Let's see, where was I? Judensaal. So he claimed, Martin Luther, here in our church in Wittenberg, a sow is sculpted in stone, young pigs and Jews, is suckling under her. Now, this particular sentence when you compare it with the words of Paul, I'm going to show this to you. They're literally calling Israel's Moshiach the great swine. Let me show you something. Actually, I just go to this right here. Go to Romans 11. I'm going to compare some scriptures with you. I just thought of it. Now, so he says to the Romans, the Gentiles, if some of the branches were broken off, and you being a wild olive, you were grafted, and it says grafted in, on, at, by them, and jointly partaking jointly with them, partaking of the root and the fatness of the olive tree. Who's that olive tree? The olive tree is Yehoshua. So what they did, here's what Martin Luther did. where he had little piglets and Jews suckling together under the sow. So he views Paul's depiction as Jews and Gentiles sucking on the swine. How is it possible then for the church to be saved during the great tribulation upon the Gentile? And as I pointed out to you many, many times, that Paul had to warn the Colossians, the Galatians, and the Corinthians about going astray while he was yet alive. I showed that to you over and over and over again. So if he had to chastise them while they were still alive, how much more after his death? Which is why you see Yehoshua in Revelation 2 and 3 warning the 7 churches in Asia Minor that he was going to have to come and fight against some of them with the sword that proceeds out of his mouth. When would he do this? Well, when he comes and takes his kingdom in Jerusalem, because they'll come and fight against him. Come on, folks, wake up! So he has behind the sow a rabbi is bent over the sow, lifting up her tail, holding her tail high and looking intensely under her tail into her Talmud, as though he were reading something acutely or extraordinary. Now, this last sentence, he is literally saying, which is also where they get their holy name. He attributed, the father of Protestantism, the father of all you Protestants, attributed the holy name of the Father to the bowels of a swine. That's where, he said, that's where they get the holy name. So let me spell it out for you. It is impossible. It is impossible to be any more opposed to the Father, Jehovah Elohim of Israel, than what Christians were in those days and are now. You cannot get any worse. It is absolutely impossible. How then is Christianity going to be saved? It won't be. Do you see what I'm getting at here? Even from the 1200s to the 1600s, and then continuing to the 1930s and 40s, Christianity was as vile as it could possibly get. And now I want you to take a look around you in Western civilization, in Christian countries. Where the Christian countries' governments push transgenderism, push every kind of vile behavior, thumbing their noses at the Creator, and it's just a continuation of the foul, horrendous abominations of their forefathers, the Christians. Romans 11 verse 11, I say, have they, Israel, stumbled that they should fall? Have they, stumbled so that they should fall? Jehovah forbid. But through their fall, through their stumble, salvation comes to the Gentiles. For what? For to provoke them to jealousy. If Israel had not sinned, the Gentiles as a whole would have no chance. Now, if the stumbling of them be the riches of the world, as you see today, the riches of the world, and the diminishing of them, the riches of the Gentiles, how much more their fullness? Their fullness is going to be greater than anything the Gentiles had ever accomplished. I speak to you, Gentiles, because I am apostle to the Gentiles. I magnify my office to provoke Jews to emulation, which are of my flesh, and save some of them during that time. Because there was a generation of rejected people. Not all of them were, but some, as a group, they were rejected. But individuals were not. But as a group, they're going to be grafted back in. You Christian Gentiles, you don't believe this. And because you don't believe the truth, something is going to happen to you. For if the casting away of them being the reconciling of the world, what shall the receiving of them, Israel, be, except life from the dead, the resurrection of the dead? That's right, literally and figuratively, both. Just like it says in Daniel 12. For because if the first fruit is holy, the lump is also holy. That means, you Christians, when you said that the Jews were sucking from a swine, you called Israel's Moshiach a swine. This is what you did. And if you did it to him, you also did it to the Father. And he's going to pay you back. And he's going to pay you Christians back in full. And if the root is holy, then so are the branches, that being all 12 branches. And if some of the branches were broken off, and you being a wild olive were grafted in among them, and jointly, partaking jointly with them of the root and the fatness of the olive tree, do not boast against the branches. You not only boasted against the branches, you boasted against the Son, and you boasted against the Father. The things you said about the Father are indescribable and unmentionable. I proved it to you. This is what Christianity is rooted in today. It is rooted in the most vile Sodom and Gomorrah, flouting against their Creator, the most that they can possibly do. Because if you boast, you don't bear the root, but the root bears you. You're boasting against the root. And you boasted against the root by calling it a swine. You will say then that the branches are broken off that I might be grafted in. Well, because of unbelief they were broken off, and you now stand by faith. Be not high-minded, but fear. You did worse than being high-minded, and you had no fear. For if Jehovah did not spare the natural branches at all, he won't spare you either. He's not going to spare you. You're not going to escape the Great Tribulation. You're not going to be raptured out of the Great Tribulation into heaven. The Christians will not. They're going to suffer it. Behold therefore the goodness and severity of Jehovah on them which fell severity, but toward you goodness, if you continue in his goodness. Obviously, you Christians did not. And so, something is going to happen to you Christians. Otherwise, you shall also be cut off, cut down. And as I pointed out in a video a while ago, the axe is laid against every tree, every nation. And any one of them that does not produce good fruit is going to be cut down and thrown into the fire. And we're about to see it. And they also, see that word? That is before. Before they are no longer in unbelief, they will be grafted in. The grafting in of them is going to cause them to believe, and he's going to pour out his Holy Spirit upon them. His Ruach Kodesh on them. And they will believe. Wild by nature, and you are grafted in contrary to nature into a good olive tree, how much more shall these who are the natural branches be grafted back into their own olive tree? For I would not, brethren, that you should be ignorant of this mystery, lest you should be wise in your own conceits, that blindness in part, or partial blindness, happened to Israel, until the fullness of the Gentiles be come in, or until the time of the Gentiles comes to the full. How do I know this? Luke 21. It words it differently. It says, when the time of the Gentiles comes to the end. And what happens next? All Israel shall be saved. All, that's every, Israel, to be saved. Sozo, to save, heal, preserve, rescue. From what? The Great Tribulation. Because when the time of the Gentiles comes to an end, great tribulation, it comes on the earth. And all Israel shall be rescued from it. Because it is written, there shall come out of Zion the deliverer, who shall turn unholiness from Jacob. For this is my covenant. What covenant? New covenant. As written in Jeremiah 31, verses 31 to 34, and Hebrews 8, verses 8 through 12. Unto them, when I shall take away their sins, concerning the gospel, they might be enemies for your sakes. But concerning the election, they are the beloved for the patriarchs' sakes. Because the gifts and calling of Jehovah cannot be changed, cannot be repented of. Now, Second Thessalonians 2:12. Now this particular fellow, this man of sin, that lineage began with Caligula. Paul is describing Caligula accurately. And once Caligula started, everyone after him became the man of sin, all the way to the man who sits on the imperial seat of the Caesars in the Vatican. Yes, he was the one who opposed and exalted himself all that is called a god, as they say. It was Caligula. Go do your research. Stop listening to the lies of your preacher or anything that is worshipped, so that he that's as as an idol sits in the temple of Jehovah. Yes, he ordered the statue of himself as Jupiter, aka Zeus, to be placed in every synagogue in his realm, including the temple in Jerusalem. And indeed, it was in there, but before they were able to set it up, the Jews threw it out, and the great Jewish revolt began, which he's talking about here. As sits in the temple, okay, to sit down in the temple of Jehovah, showing himself that he is a god. Remember you not, when I was with you, I told you these things. What good was it for him to tell them about it if it wasn't going to happen in his time? It did happen in their time, shortly after Paul died, or shortly after Paul was murdered. And now you know that which holds that he might be revealed in his time, very shortly after Paul's death. For the mystery of iniquity is already working. It was already there. You Christians say it only starts when the time of the Gentiles comes to the end. The time of the Gentiles comes to the end. That means all of this is ended. You say it's just about to start. It's already working. Only he who now holds back until he be taken out of the way. So he must have been talking about the Caesar before Caligula. As soon as he's taken out of the way, Caligula will come up and do exactly what he said, what Paul just said here. But you don't want you Christians, you don't want the truth. You don't want to believe the truth. All right? You want to go for Santa Claus sliding down the chimney, and you want to go for bunnies laying Easter eggs, which are obvious lies. If you can't be trusted with the truth on the little things, then you're not going to be telling the truth on the big, large things. It's just that simple. And then shall that wicked be revealed. Caligula. Everyone called him crazy. Whom the Moshiach will consume with the spirit of his mouth and shall destroy with the brightness of his coming. And even today, the one who sits on the imperial seat of the Caesars calls himself Father. He is no different from Caligula. That's where it started. It's going to end with the man at the imperial seat of the Caesars at the Vatican, even whose coming is after the working of Satan with power and signs and lying wonders. One of the lying wonders is the blood changing, and the other one is the on the Russian Orthodox side, the so-called holy fire, which is fake, and it's a mockery of the truth. With all deceivableness of unrighteousness in them that perish, because they receive not the love of the truth. Instead, you want to believe in fables, like Easter eggs and Santa Claus coming down the chimney. They received not the truth, love of the truth, so that they might be saved. And because of this, Jehovah will send them strong delusion, that they might believe the lie, that they all might be damned, who believed not the truth, but had pleasure in unrighteousness. And so now you see the fruit of it today. It's undeniable. This is the seed that you Christians planted with hatred of the Jews, and it has now become every form of sodomy, transgenderism, and every kind of other vile act. That's what the final outcome is. And now the nukes, the threat of nukes is real, folks. I don't know if you watched the news yesterday, but Foreign Minister Lavrov in Russia keeps warning that this thing is going to go nuclear. But you keep going about your business, you keep going about your transgenderism and your every other kind of vile work and vile doctrine, and you'll keep on doing it. And even when the nukes start flying, you're going to keep doing it. Until all your strength is gone. And you become that woman. Or you go from the great whore who had everything given to her to now you are that woman, as they say, she's for the streets. That's right. She's for the streets.